The Dharma, incomparably profound and exquisite, is rarely met with even in hundreds of thousands of millions of kalpas. We now can see it, hear it, accept and hold it. May we realize the deep mind of the Tathagata. So this is the 6th day of the February 2024 session at Mountain Gate. And Roshi asked me to talk this afternoon. Thanks to a fellow Sangha member, I found a really fun article to start off with. Some of you may know that Elmo recently sent out a post on X, which used to be called Twitter, where he asked everybody how they were doing, and lots of people wrote back, and it seems like most of them were not doing well. And so a Washington Post author, Alexandra Petrie, I'm not sure how to pronounce her name, on February 2nd, 2024, posted a really funny little vignette as if Elmo was overwhelmed by all the negative and despairing messages he received after he asked everybody how they were doing. And the scene starts with him going into a bar because he's in such despair over everybody having such a hard time. And so it says, a bar at night, there's an empty stool at the end, and Elmo enters. The bartender says, Elmo? And Elmo says, hello, Mr. Bartender. Elmo would like something to drink, please. And the bartender says, sure, Elmo. And Elmo asks for the strongest drink you have. So the bartender hands him a glass of lemonade with a sweatband that is visibly shoulder pressing to enormous weights. And Elmo says, perfect. Elmo needed a strong drink to help him after this week. And then the strong lemonade, because it's kind of alive, says, how can I help, Elmo? And then the bartender says, do you want a non-anthropomorphic drink as well, Elmo? And Elmo says, yes, please. In addition to the strong drink, can Elmo have a non-anthropomorphic glass of ice water? The bartender says, sure thing. So he hands him a normal glass of ice water. Thank you, Mr. Bartender, Elmo says. And again, the strong lemonade asks, how can we help you, Elmo? And Elmo said, Elmo is full of regret. Elmo is experiencing a dark night of the soul. Elmo asked on X, strong lemonade said, the letter X? And then at the end of the bar, there is a letter X, also anthropomorphic, who's sitting at the end of the bar, nursing a vodka on the rocks. And that letter X says, no, something different. Don't talk about it. And then Elmo said, sorry, X. Anyway, Elmo asked everyone how they were doing. At that point, Big Bird enters with Count Von Count and Bert and Ernie. Big Bird asks, how are they doing, Elmo? And Elmo says, well not well at all. And the bartender asks, oh? And Elmo said, everybody wanted to tell Elmo how they were doing. More than 60,000 people responded to Elmo, and everyone was doing very poorly. People said they were at their lowest point. There were so many responses, and they were all so sad. Even the president responded and said it was hard to sweep away the clouds. The lemonade said, that sounds tough. Elmo said, it was tough, lemonade, like being handed lots and lots of lemons. And then Elmo said again, Elmo feels like Elmo is gazing into a big deep hole from which nothing emerges. And Big Bird said, not even light? And then Elmo said, not even light. Count Von Count said, not even a bat? Elmo said, not even a bat. Then Ernie asked, not even a rubber ducky? Elmo said, not even a rubber ducky. A chime sounded, and then Big Bird walked in and said, oh, Elmo, it's time for the letter of the day. And Elmo said, the letter of the day is O. And Ernie said, O is for octopus? Elmo said, sure, and if you say O by itself, Elmo has discovered it can be a cry of metaphysical distress. Oh, oh! Big Bird said, it sounds like you're gazing into the abyss, Elmo. And then Elmo said, yes, Elmo is gazing into the abyss. Ernie said, oh, that's no good, Elmo. All that emerges from the abyss is existential despair. And then Fozzie entered, said, bear? This bear? And Elmo said, no, existential despair. And Fozzie said, oh. Then Fozzie left. And Elmo said, Elmo doesn't know what to do. Elmo wishes he could help, but it is all so heavy, and Elmo is not strong enough, even with the metal rods holding his arms up. Maybe Elmo is experiencing this despair. Then Count Von Count said, one despair. And then Bert chimed in and he said, when you gaze into the abyss gazes also into you. By Friedrich Nietzsche. Big Bird said, Nietzsche? How do you spell Nietzsche? And Count Von Count said, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 consonants in a row. Ah ha ha ha. And then Elmo said, wait. Elmo wants to understand. If Elmo gazes into the abyss, then the abyss gazes also into Elmo? So maybe the abyss can see Elmo? Bert said, I guess. And then Elmo said, hello, abyss. Everybody say hello to the abyss. Hello, abyss. And the abyss said, hello. And then Elmo said, abyss, are you sad too? And the abyss said, nom nom nom, I am full of existential despair. And then Elmo said, Elmo thought he was alone. Big Bird, are you gazing into the abyss? Big Bird said, oh yes. And then Elmo said, Ernie, are you gazing into the abyss? Ernie said, I am, and so is Rubber Ducky. Elmo said, and if the whole internet is gazing into the abyss, except for Chance the Rapper, who said he was doing well, then Elmo is not alone after all. Even the abyss is not alone. You can gaze into the abyss with me. We can all gaze into the abyss together. Big Bird said, hooray! And then Bert said, but Elmo, we're all still gazing into the abyss. And Elmo said, yes, but Elmo has to start somewhere. And then the end of the article says, they stare into the abyss together. The lemonade does more presses, my bench presses with the weight. And then it fades out except for the letters, brought to you by the letter O. So it's a pretty cute little expression of how things are today. A lot of people are having a really hard time. And being in the presence of other people, whether they're having a hard time or not, seems like most of them probably are, it can be a big comfort. And we all do have to start somewhere, and that's a decent place to start. We all come to practice, usually out of some level of suffering. For some of us, it's dissatisfaction with life, a sense that there could be more, and they're just not sure what that is. So there's this pervasive dissatisfaction, or dukkha, as the Buddha called it. For others, we are looking for relief from more intense suffering, wanting relief from high anxiety or grief or trauma. But either way, there is this sort of pool of suffering that a lot of people are swimming around in and wanting relief from. And the suffering can be very isolating. The aloneness that can sort of accompany it can also make it feel 10 times worse. So, just like in the article with Elmo, knowing that there are others also staring into the abyss can really help ease that a little bit. In Zen, we have Sangha. We have, that's the Buddhist term for community. We have this community of fellow practitioners who are also wanting to check out the abyss, see what's there, and see what's on the other side of it. And we can really support each other in that process. It's not just knowing that we're all in it together that makes a difference. We can, directly comfort each other if we're having a hard time. And during sesshin, it's especially palpable. Mitra-roshi is often quoting Kapla-roshi, who often said that Sangha members during sesshin really support each other when one member's energy is kind of flagging. Often somebody else's focus will be very strong. And so the collected focus for the group stays strong, and people can sort of draft off each other, kind of the way Canadian geese fly in formation, the bird in front, sort of drafts for the birds behind. And so birds take turns being the first person in line, so to speak, and taking on the headwinds and creating a nice draft for everyone else. So in that way, during sesshin, everyone sort of benefits from teamwork. When one of us feels a little bit dispirited or energy's flagging, we can rely on others in the sesshin, not just for energy, of course, too, for, discussing aspects of practice we're confused about. That's the role of the teacher. But other students can help too, clarify a point of confusion or, helping us recognize when we're caught in something. Of course, hugs are also really helpful. We do laugh a lot here at Mountain Gate, which I think helps a lot too. Having that break for levity and humor can go a long way towards keeping the spirits up when we're doing a sesshin or otherwise. Just enjoying life is important as we stare into the abyss together, trying to unravel its mysteries. And, as we're doing sesshin, staring into the abyss together, if you do a lot of sesshin, sometimes you can get to a point where you feel like there are certain patterns in sesshin, and you know that, by a certain day in sesshin that things should be happening a certain way, or at least you feel like things should be happening in a certain way. There should be a certain amount of let go-ness. You shouldn't be having issues like distraction or having emotional issues come up by the end of sesshin. A lot of times people feel that way, feeling like, well, by the end of sesshin, everything should be pretty cleared out and just going steadily deeper. And that is happening. It just doesn't always feel that way. Sometimes as we've gone through sesshin and gone deeper and deeper into our practice, more stuff can come up that's sort of deeper level stuff. And when it comes up, it can feel very strong and can be very distracting. The important thing is to recognize that it's come up and work with it like you would at any other time in sesshin, recognizing that it's something to open to the extent that it's distracting you, experience it fully, but do the breath, continuing to do the breath. And the more you return to the breath, the weaker it gets. But often as we get closer to something deeper, like a deeper awareness of how things really are, as that self-identity starts to crack, you can start getting really intense things coming up. And just remembering that those things that come up, even though they feel really, really intense and strong, they're just paper thin. That's true regardless of when they come up, that they're so insubstantial, they're practically less than ghosts. They're not real in a very real sense, but in another very real sense, we do have to process them, or they just continue to distract us. But it's even more so towards the end of sesshin. We've got so much doriki, or focused energy, that has developed, that when these things come up, they're no longer the big mountain that they would have been at the beginning of sesshin. They're more like a molehill at that point, even though they feel like a mountain. So with all that focused energy, you can move through it in a much faster way than you would at the beginning of sesshin. And so I'm just saying this as a point of encouragement. If stuff has been coming up and it's been really intense, just know that it's deeper level stuff. So hooray that it's come up now to the surface so you can see it. And it is going to be much easier to move through than it would have been at the beginning of sesshin because of all that doriki, or that focused energy that's developed. So just a little point of encouragement there. I understand that a fair number of people have been having that sort of experience the sesshin, so I just wanted to say that it's not something to be discouraged about. It's something that just happens as we're doing deep practice, and just to keep going like you have been, and before you know it, you'll be on the other side of it. And then a lot of times there's fear of fear, or there's fear of opening to something big that has come up. And just acknowledging what is happening is all we can do sometimes, and that is enough to start eroding the patterns around the particular issue, whatever it might be. Just like Elmo did in the vignette, he acknowledged that the abyss was there. He wasn't sure how to work with it, but just acknowledging helped relieve some of the suffering around it. And we can do that too when we have something really big come up that just feels really hard to work with. Just acknowledging it and doing the breath is sometimes all we can do, but that's an excellent place to start. And what will happen is it will slowly start to unravel. The knots will untie and clarity will return again. And as I mentioned a moment ago, sometimes what comes up towards the end of sesshin is extremely intense fear. It is that fear of death that comes up for people doing deep practice for a fair amount of time. And in Christianity, it's called the long dark night of the soul. When you're sort of stuck between fear of proceeding, because there's fear of death on the other side of it, and then despair on the other, or whatever brought you to practice, whatever realm of suffering brought you to practice is on one side, and then you have this really intense fear on the other. And it feels impossible, like an impossible choice. Like you can't go this way, you can't go that way, and you're just kind of there. It's important to know that you're not alone in this, that is something that everybody in spiritual paths opens to at a certain point. And sometimes just acknowledging it is all you can do. But opening in little increments in whatever way you can to that fear will help diminish its power. And over time, it will have diminished enough that you can break right through it and then see the other side where there is no fear and there is no despair. But that's something that Sangha and teachers can help you move through. And I thought I'd also kind of talk a little bit about what Alma was talking about in terms of staring into the abyss and the abyss staring back. It's a really interesting point. And often what happens when things come up that are really hard is people feel like, well, that's not me. That suffering that's come up, that's not me. And so there's a strong tendency to push it away and deny it. But essentially, that suffering is you, and it's also not you at the same time. But to the extent that it is you, that's the abyss looking back. You are the abyss. The abyss is you. And just recognizing that suffering that's come up, if we push it away, then we can't fully acknowledge its inner essence and understand its inner essence. And if we can't really acknowledge or understand its inner essence, then we can't fully free ourselves from it. And so it's not something you can think your way through, obviously, just like nothing in Zen practice is something you can think your way through. But it's an important thing to recognize that, yes, when you stare into the abyss stares back, because that abyss is you. That is you. It doesn't mean you're a bad person if you've got some kind of suffering, whatever it is. Could be anger, could be fear, could be despair, whatever it is. That's you, that energy, that's you. And opening to that as fully as you would anything else will help you come to see that in a way that's very, very freeing. And so if you find yourself in the long, dark night of the soul, recognizing that it's not separate from you, that you will find yourself within it, and also you'll be able to move beyond it and see that there is no abyss, that there is no valley of the shadow of night, I believe. No, valley of the shadow of death, I believe that's what it's called in Christianity. There is no long, dark night in essence. And yet that is something that needs to be moved through. So I'm not sure how clear this is. I'm not sure it can be explained in a way that will not sound difficult or confusing, but that was the goal. So I wonder if anybody has questions or would like clarification about that, because it was rather beautifully brought up in this Washington Post article. about the process, the way we can approach it, and in a way that it's nothing to be afraid of.
Shannon, can you explain the abyss looking back at you again? I think you explained it, but I didn't have an aha feeling about it.
Yeah, I didn't have an aha feeling when I was explaining it, so that makes sense. Yeah, so right. So in the story, Elmo is looking into the abyss and realizing that when he stares into it, it's looking back at him. What that really means is that when we have suffering or despair and we're pushing it away thinking it's not us, right? Well, that's not me. I need to feel differently. I need to feel clearer. I need to push that away. When we do that, it just sort of it enhances the sense of divide within us, and we don't recognize the truth, which is that we are that suffering. But
That's creating the abyss. The pushing away is creating the abyss.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's creating that sense of division and other. So opening to what it is, allowing a sense of oneness with it, becoming one with it is a term that's often used in Zen for good reason. I just wish there was a better way to describe it, but yes, recognizing that it is that energy is not separate from you, and that essentially we are creating it. We are creating that abyss. So there are a lot of different dimensions to it. We're one with it. We are creating it, and it's also empty. So there are many different dimensions of this, abyss that we all stare into up until a certain point. And we often have to go through this period of feeling like we have no great options. We're either staring into the abyss, fear of death. There's where do you turn? When you've been doing practice long enough and you've let go enough, then that point opens up where you have to go through what feels like a death process. You really have to open to the scariest possible thing before you see anything different. Before you see that light in the darkness, you have to open to the most intense fear, existential fear, existential dread, opening to that fully. So Elmo was starting at the process, the beginning part of it, acknowledging that it was there and recognizing that it was within him, essentially, right? So that we have this despair, we have this suffering within us. As we dive into it, at the bottom of it, what we find is that existential fear, that existential dread. And when you're at the bottom of it, it feels like there are no good options. It's just suffering all around or intense fear of death and often feeling like you're dying. But once you go through that, once you just sort of keep plodding along with the support of Sangha in particular and a teacher especially, then you start to see that there's something completely different on the other side of that fear, on the other side of that suffering. And once that starts to open up a little bit, it's pretty enticing, and it's a lot easier to just keep on moving through whatever comes up so that you can open more deeply to that understanding that's beyond words and thought, that's beyond the despair and beyond the fear.
Thank you, Shannon.
Did that make more sense?
Yes, it did.
Okay.
I'm clear about it. Thank you.
Okay. Well, it's been wonderful sitting with everybody, and if we don't have any more questions, then we'll return back to sitting with Sangha and enjoying the rest of our session. Thank you for listening.